Company and its main competitor, the British East India Company, were the first multinational corporations. They wielded the power of sovereign nations on the seas and generated tremendous profits plundering the far corners of the world. When people think of these outfits, they think of spices, and while it is true that the Dutch and British East India Companies imported spices and tea from the east to the west, the most lucrative part of their business was the opium trade. A Dutch West India Trading Company was also formed to profit from the lucrative slave trade in the Americas. To put it bluntly, much of what these trading companies engaged in was licensed piracy. Another interesting fact about these trading companies is that they were dominated by Freemasons, from the investors and governors down to the ship's captains. This is evident in the numerous Masonic lodges which sprung up along the trade routes. So how curious that both pirates and Freemasons are associated with this symbol. The skull and crossbones is a prominent symbol in Masonry. Here are some Freemasonic aprons. A skull and usually crossbones are also present in what is called the Chamber of Reflection, a room prepared for initiates undergoing the Masonic rite of the first degree in many orders. What few people know is that both Freemasons and pirates inherited the symbol from the same place, the Knights Templar. The true origin of the skull and crossbones is most likely the Chi Rho, an ancient symbol whose meaning is not morbid at all, but more akin to rebirth. The first Templar to fly the skull and crossbones, legend has it, was Roger II of Sicily, who harassed and plundered the coasts of Greece and northern Africa, and for whom the Jolly Roger is named. According to myth, Roger's father, King Roger I, copulated with the corpse of his wife Adelaide, Roger II's dead mother, and returned 9 months later to find only a skull and crossbones. The original Templars were Normans, the blood product of Franks and Vikings. The order was formed during the First Crusade, and with special privileges granted by the Pope, they amassed great wealth and power, operated a vast banking network, and built hundreds of churches and castles across Europe and the Middle East. They also maintained a large fleet of ships and dominated the commerce of much of the world. The Templar Knights had a good run until 1307, when King Philip IV of France, who was deeply in debt to the order, lit on the idea of wiping out his debts by charging the Templars with heresy. And so, with the consent of the Pope, his men began arresting knights. Many were imprisoned and tortured, and some burned at the stake. Most, however, fled, mainly to Portugal and Spain, Scotland, and very likely Switzerland. How interesting that the home of the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, may well have been a refuge of these medieval bankers. Author Ernesto Frere explored what happened to the Templar fleet, which disappeared from the shores of La Rochelle when the hammer of King Philip came down. He concludes, like others, that many Templars took to the sea after their banishment, thereafter adopting a life of piracy. These skull and bones